Welcome back to Big Boss Mare with Brandy Von Holten. This morning I have Sydney Kotow. Okay, so Sydney Kotow is here to, she is one of my farriers that we use at Von Holten Ranch. And then she's also been getting, we've been hooking up to do some stuff that's all sorts of crazy. Like we rode 2 mules in the Guinness Book of World Record attempt. That was with the University of Central Missouri. And I don't know what else. She's done some trail riding here. She's cooked for my dad before. My dad thinks that she is the best campfire cook in the world, and she's shaking her head no right now. But anyways, she's also a farrier that does hot shoes, and we've hosted a farrier competition here. She did not compete that weekend, but she was here on site, and she was camping with a bunch of friends. So I know with, I'm in my 40s. I'm 10 years older than her almost. So there's no telling what kind of shenanigans we're going to get into for the next 30, 40 years. Okay, so anyways, I thought I would bring her on to showcase another professional in the equine industry. Okay, so Sydney. So let's explain. Oh, okay. So here we go. I'm going live right now also on Facebook, and I had my camera turned around wrong. So anyways, all right. So Sydney, explain the whole dual citizenship.
So my mother was born in Grosse Pointe, Michigan, and my father was born in Windsor, Ontario, Canada, which is really not that far apart. And during the 60s, when everything was going on in Detroit, as some people remember, not a lot do, it was not a really good place to live. That's where kind of Detroit got the bad rap. People were beating up my aunts and uncles, and they were coming back from school, taking their lunch money, so my grandfather decided, well, he's going to go back to his roots and move out to a farm. And actually being originally from Canada, he moved his whole family back across the border to Canada onto a little bitty farm, and he would drive back and forth every weekend to work at Henry Ford there in Detroit. And that's where my mom and dad met, was in Harrow, Ontario, Canada, little tiny farming town. Has the longest running fair in North America right now, the Harrow Fair, and that's where I grew up.
Okay, so any major difference between Canada and the United States, like huge difference? Do you have anything?
There's a lot of differences between Canada and the United States.
Well, what's something that's like, give me like top 3 things that you're like, whoa, that's way different. I love putting people on the spot.
Without getting very political, because there's a lot of things I would say politically that are different.
Yeah, we'll leave that
I would
out.
say the government's way more involved in Canada as far as like what you do, what you can't do, what's, and then how they broadcast it to the people. So you can definitely tell that it's very more like a kind of a mob mentality in Canada, where everyone's like, you need to do this to be the good person, right? Okay. And so they get that, the Canadians are, the nice people, and the, stuff like that, because Canadians are very nice. We channel our anger into the Canadian goose, I think. If you've ever been bit by one of them, they're not fun.
Okay, and then, so the government's set up differently.
Yes, very differently. I would say people are in general friendly and a lot more trusting there than here. Not necessarily justifiably so, but I think it's the way that, you've been told to, trust in the police and trust in the authorities and, be good to your neighbors, stuff like that. I would say there's a lot less fighting there. And then I don't know, where I grew up was so Americanized. All our TV stations were from Toledo, which is just across the lake. I learned both Fahrenheit and Celsius because our TV would come in Fahrenheit, and the newspaper, which, because we didn't really have internet then, would always come in Celsius because it was, on the Canadian side.
So my husband is not a fan of the metric system, okay? And me and him argue back and forth about this, and I'm like, honey, it's like it's everything's on a base 10. And he's just like, oh, no, we can't be doing that. And I was like, how can something that has the measurement of 9/16 be easier than something that's at the base of a base of 10? And he's just like, I'm not listening to you. I'm not listening. It's so un-American. But he cannot. He had a measuring tape, and one side of it was in standard and one side was in metric, and he's like, get this away from me. I cannot handle it.
Oh, see, I love that because, again, being right on the border, I learned both.
Right.
Which absolutely confused me because
right.
I'm horrible at math anyways. If I can see it in front of me and put it together, I can do it. And so it made sense. But when I had to write it on paper in school, it was a complete disaster. And so I can do both. But coming here and just using, like, Jim would use fractions a lot, my husband, and he would be like, oh, get me this, like, for example, 9/16, and I was like, the what? Because I could be like, oh, it's this millimeter, I'd like, bam, I'd have it, like, no problem. But so it was kind of confusing going back and forth from that. But I was lucky in the sense that when we did grow up right on the border, we learned both. And it wasn't necessarily by the schools. It was just because it was there.
Right.
It wasn't, you know.
So my husband, he's just like, he says Pinterest is the devil and the metric system is the devil.
Pinterest because you get projects for him, right?
Oh, yeah, Pinterest because I'm like, David, look at this project. And he's like, stop looking on Pinterest. And I'm all like, no, that's where the good stuff's at, man.
Yeah, it is. I know.
Anyways, okay, so you moved to the United States in 2011. So what brought you to the United States?
So after I was done going to university, I decided, sorry, Mom, I'm still going to be a farrier. And so I went off out of the 5 schools I had picked, I went off to Oklahoma. There was a couple across Canada, 3 in the States that I was interested in, and then 1 over in Europe. And I actually ended up going to Oklahoma. And so that's where my husband and I, Jim, met. And I wouldn't say it was love at first sight. The first thing I remember him saying to me was, we were standing at the anvil in the morning, and he's going to shoot me for saying this. We were standing at the anvil in the morning at 6 a.m. because they expected you to make shoes that early and then come back, eat your breakfast and come back to class. And
I think I'm going to have to edit probably, right? Are you going to say a cuss word?
No. I
just could imagine, like.
But this is a certain generation will understand this. So I was standing at the anvil, 6 a.m., just yawning because I don't know how they expected anybody to do work that early, especially pound on steel. And I'm yawning, and he's about 20 feet away. And I'm standing there, open mouth yawning, and I hear, you sure got a purty mouth. And I went, what? Who is this creep?
But he was being a weirdo.
Oh, yeah, and if anybody knows.
Purposely being a weirdo.
Oh, yeah, because he had this, like, weird little look on his face, and he was kind of hunched over looking at me. It weirded me out because I was like, oh. Who is this weird Southern American guy? Did you know the
reference at the time?
Yes, I'd seen Deliverance.
Okay, all right. I was like making sure that you knew the reference.
I did, but it totally like threw me off guard because there was like nobody else around, and here's this like creepo looking at me. Like I wish you could put the face on the podcast that he was making, but you know Jim, and you know exactly the face he was making. Gosh. And I decided that I was going to date him at that point. Not at that point, but within the next few days.
Do you know some of the first sentences I've ever said to people that end up becoming like a major player in my life was my martial arts instructor. The first time nobody introduced her as like, hey, this is a lady that won a bronze medal in the Olympics, okay? Well, at the time, I was on the USA team, and then they had flown her in to coach us at this world championship or at this international competition. Well, I didn't know her backstory. Well, I fight heavyweight and she fought flyweight. There's 8 weight divisions. The little bitty one is called Finn. I think you had to weigh under 103 or under 106 and below. And I'm like, below? That's like 2 bags of horse feed. Yeah. Like that's a human.
That's a human.
That's an adult. But but she fought one division up, and I think she had to weigh under like 111, 112, somewhere around that. I don't really know those weight divisions. I'm kind of just like saying random numbers kind of, but close to that, because heavyweight was like 158 or 156. It doesn't even matter, and above. Okay, so I was like the above. Well, heavyweight fight's completely different than the little people, okay? Because little people are fast, heavyweights though, but whenever we have mass and whenever that hits, it can make major impact, okay? They have to hit you a lot faster. We've got, okay, so it's just a whole, anyway, so the first time I meet her is whenever we're going to fight, and I just tell her, not whenever she and I are going to fight. She was coaching me. I was fighting. And I told her, she was like, hey, whenever we get going, you're going to do this, and then we'll just see how it goes first round. And I was like, hey, so in between the rounds, I just need you to hand me my water and get out of the way. Okay. I didn't know. I thought she was just like some kind of like little cheerleader, like, wee, because I see this really petite woman. Well, little did I know that I end up like moving states, and it changed like my complete life path, because now I'm in Missouri, and I met my husband, and I stayed, and we opened Von Holten Ranch, and then here I am on this podcast. But it started with me being sassy, like the most awkward first sentence. It was not an icebreaker. It was a what?
Yeah.
But then by the time that we left, I was fighting in Puerto Rico then, but by the time I left, we were like great friends, but it was like a very awkward start. Yeah. And that's what makes me think of whenever you're telling me about, Jim, and looking at you, you sure do have a pretty mouth, and you're like, bleh.
Yeah, I was like,
what are you talking?
This is weirdo. Yeah.
Get away from me, stranger danger, stranger danger.
Yeah, literally.
But you fell in love with him and married him instead.
Yeah, something like that.
So, y'all have been married for how long?
Actually married for 4 or 5 years.
4 or 5 years. And you
look up the date. Neither of us are big, like, date people.
Do you have the month?
Totally. Yeah, it's September 26th.
Oh, okay. I was like, do you have the month?
Yeah, no, I do. It's September 26th.
Not big on
2017.
Okay.
Okay, yeah, I had to think about that for a minute. Yeah.
Well, yeah, because 9/26/17, it doesn't, like, there's no flow to that. That's a rough date to remember. Ours is 5/15/5.
Oh, well.
Okay, and the reason we got married on the 15th is because my birthday's on the 15th and his is on the 15th, just different months. So we got married on the 15th.
Yeah.
And then we chose May to get married because my husband wanted he wanted a gift because his birthday is in December. And he's like, I got screwed out of birthday gifts.
Yeah, he's a Christmas baby.
Oh, he hates it. He's just like, I'd have to get a Christmas gift out from underneath the tree for my birthday. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So literally, we chose May so he could get a gift in the middle of the year.
Oh.
Okay, and we chose the 15th so I could remember. Okay.
Yeah.
Anyways, okay, so y'all have a daughter. You have a daughter named Ellie. So, is Ellie more like you or more like your husband?
Everybody, including Jim, says she is little Sydney.
Okay, she's little Sydney. Okay, so she's just out there living her best life?
Oh, yeah. No one tells that kid what she's going to think or what she's going to do, and she is opinionated on everything.
That's awesome.
She's fire.
Is she going to be a girly girl or a tomboy?
A
little
bit of
mix.
Both. A little bit of both. Like, she's at the age where she's like, princesses and dresses are cute. But then at the same time, I asked her, I said, what do you want to be for Halloween? She goes, an orange kitty with yellow stripes.
Okay, an orange kitty with yellow stripes.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly that. And that's exactly what we made because we make all our Halloween costumes like my mom did for us. We make all our Halloween costumes. God bless my friend that has a sewing machine because my mother was a seamstress. I am not. And I did not learn that skill from her. So I sent it to a friend and we made the costume together.
Okay. So Sydney's in her 30s. But then whenever she married Jim has 3 kids from previous. And they're 21, 20, and 17 right now. So nothing like being a 21-year-old stepmother or a 33-year-old stepmother to a 21-year-old.
Yeah. And he's actually here with me today. He's going to help me shoe the horses and stuff like that. He's been doing that since he was about 10. So he's been wandering around with us. Let's
get into, you had stated something that was a little odd sounding, and I think it's Canada knocking on our door. Okay, you said that you had went to university. Okay, well it's worded a little different for me. So explain to me like the concept of university in Canada, and then because whenever I say that I went to a university, but you say I went to university. So what's up with that?
So in Canada, when you're in school, because here in the United States, you could go to school, like, for example, in Sedalia, or you could go to school in Columbia, and they could be 2 different curriculums, okay? Where in Canada, the schools are all run underneath the provincial curriculum. The province is just like a state. And so in Canada, when you're in high school, you have your applied courses, and then you have your academic courses, and your applied courses are the ones that you get into a college with, and the applied are like a university. So usually one is like a little bit more I wouldn't
so
say
it's
harder.
Like honors?
Kind of. They're one of those, like, because you could have good grades in both, and they'll put you in different places, right? When you do your high school courses, so like you could do like an applied English, and it's basically what you just have to have to get into a college, because you have to have like so many English courses. Or you could do the academic ones, which would be like if you wanted to be an English major, or you wanted to get into a college that does.
Well, they make you decide early on what you're going to do with your life.
Yeah.
Which, they kind of do that here in the States, because you have honors classes and dual credit where you can get, college credit. Well, that it kind of, some of the classes are weighted, so it messes with your GPA.
Yeah.
And then if you can get a higher GPA, then you're going to get more scholarships.
Yes.
So I guess they do make you make decisions here, and it sounds like it's just decisions.
It's similar. It's similar. And then in Ontario, they used to have a grade 13, which they called the OAC year, and it was if you wanted to upgrade, or like say for example you were taking applied courses and you wanted to, all of a sudden you decided, well, I want to go do this instead, and you didn't have that kind of credential to even really be considered there, you could take that 13th year.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay, so that helped clear it up a little bit. It's just a terminology, but it's same concept.
Same thing, yeah.
So you let's see here, university, it looks like you studied equine science.
So I originally wanted to go to school to be a vet, and I decided not that far in that was not the thing for me. The math was very, very hard. I could do the science, I could do the chemistry, I could do the biology. Math was so hard for me, and I struggled so hard, only to find out that I had kind of a learning disability later with math, which wasn't, a big deal. But anyways, I ended up changing my major, got a Bachelor of Science in Equine Science, or Bachelor in Equine Science. And when I was done that, I managed barns for a few years. I made really, really good money doing that. And I decided, I was like, man, I don't want to be the barn help. I don't want to be the stall cleaner. Not that I was taking care of barns or anything, but I said I didn't want to be the barn cleaner. I didn't want to be the one always being paid to take care of other people's horses. I wanted to be that person. And so I said, sorry, Mom, still going off to horseshoeing school. I would forage at our local, we had a little local homestead. My dad would volunteer and cut the grass there once he retired for him. And they invited us one weekend when I was 13 to go blacksmith. They had a little course going on for their volunteers to make sure they had enough volunteers to run the forge there.
Right.
And it kind of snowballed out of control from there. My mom's best friend was a farrier. That's where she learned how to forge. One of the only women farriers then, which is really, really rare back in the 70s and 80s. And she learned to forge there, and so I kind of continued on the tradition and helped them out until I moved. They remind me all the time how much they miss me there.
So here, just go ahead and define the word forge, just in case I have somebody that doesn't know what you're talking about.
So a forge in blacksmithing or farriery is what we use to heat the metal that we are either crafting or putting on a horse's feet. Okay. The forge in that one is a coke forge. So that's the fuel that it makes the fire, basically. And it is run... basically, there's a fire pot. You put the coke on top. The air comes from underneath, and when you light the fire, that's what fuels the...
So whenever you say Coke, you're not talking about cocaine or Coca-Cola. It's just a different form of...
It's the fuel source for the fire.
Okay, it's the fuel source for the fire.
Yeah.
Okay.
And now most modern-day farriers will use propane.
Okay.
In a propane forge, so it's got a liner. You can turn it on, shut it off. It doesn't take hours to cool down or for the fire to die out. Where a coke or a coal forge, you got to basically kind of make sure it's not going to burn your barn down when you're done. Where a propane, you just turn a switch and it's done. Okay.
So you're taking straight metal, and then you're heating it up, and then you are shaping it into whatever shape you're needing. Yeah. Which is a whole bunch of horseshoes. Horseshoes and mule shoes.
There's as many stars in the sky as there are kinds of horseshoes you can make. There's never one that's going to be perfect for another horse and another one that's perfect for one scenario or the other scenario. There's, you if you got a group of farriers together and you say, how would you shoe this horse? Not a single person would agree with the other one.
Okay, so have you burnt yourself?
Yes, a lot.
A lot? Okay,
scars
so
on my hands.
You got scars all over your hands, but you do still have all your fingers, and they all still work.
Yeah.
I can't even see her scars on her fingers. It doesn't look that bad. So let's go through. What do you think? Do you think there's a shortage of farriers right now, or or shortage of good farriers?
So I can say last year, because of COVID, I saw a lot of younger farriers that were just a couple years out of school that didn't have an established business that went on to take other jobs. I've seen a couple of them go on to take jobs in law enforcement. I've seen several of them go to factories. I've seen several of them go to welding. And so that puts us who have been full-time and have an established business kind of on a spot, because we're at the point where we can't necessarily help these people because we don't have the time, or we don't go to their area, or they don't have the type of horses that we want to do. But then we don't have the kids that come out of school, because last year there was nobody who went through horseshoeing school hardly. And so that's
there's
the problem.
like a dip.
Yeah, there's definitely a big dip, and us who are full-time are really feeling it this year. And then when I talk about good farriers, I always say that horseshoeing school, or if you apprentice with somebody or something like that, that's like the tip of the iceberg. You don't necessarily have to go to school in the U.S. to be a farrier, but it's what you do after school or your initial education that matters. So you can go to horseshoeing school, you could spend 2 weeks, 12 weeks, 6 months there, and when you get out, you know enough just to be dangerous and probably get yourself in some trouble. So it's the apprenticeship that you do after that. And then I always emphasize a lot on continuing education, so going to clinics, riding with other farriers if you're out of an apprenticeship regularly, making sure that you are updating your information and your skill set constantly. And there's a lot of those around that don't. They can slap shoes on the horses. It's cheap. It's, I would say.
And people don't know.
Mm-hmm.
People don't know if they have a good or a bad farrier. You know what I mean? They have to figure it out.
Yeah, that's kind of the hard thing. I would say if you have somebody that's booked up that you can hardly fit new clients into, that's probably going to be somebody that's going to have a higher skill set.
Right.
Somebody that's working with vets that would have vet recommendations is probably going to be somebody that's going to be able to make bar shoes, somebody that's going to be able to make patent bar shoes, someone that's going to be able to customize and help that horse, or have the networking and resources to call another farrier when they cannot do it, to be able to figure out how to do it or to pass them on to somebody that knows more.
So she's had, you've worked on several of our horses here, and our mules, my mules, JoJo and CoCo, and they love you. I mean, my mules know who you are, because they're like, oh, yeah, here comes the butt scratching. And then my mule JoJo is just like, oh, no, you don't get to scratch the butt of CoCo.
Yeah.
You're only here to scratch my butt. And like that, my mules know you.
Oh,
so
yeah.
like, I love that, you have a relationship with my mules, because a lot of people are like, let me get the job done. And you're just like, oh, let's take a second to see what's going on. And you've made some recommendations before for like minerals and things that they can have and that I can get from the local tax shop. So what are some things that you've noticed in general from different areas or the Midwest? Is there any kind of shortage or surplus that they are getting or not getting, like copper or iron, or what do you see?
So having the background in equine science, I did quite a bit of equine nutrition, which was not my favorite course at the time. But now that I realize how much it goes into hoof and the overall horse's health, it makes me want to know more about it. And just enough that I can say, hey, here's the issue. Here's another equine nutritionist that knows more than I do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one that knows about the mineral balancing, because we do have books and standards out there, like the nutritional requirements of horses is a big book that we were given in university, that they were like, this is the gold standard. This is the National Research Council put this out. This is what we go off of. But then you see what they recommend for minerals and balancing, and you look at big companies like Nutrina and Purina, and they don't follow that. They may have research, but I'm going, man, if this is the book that we're told to follow in university, and then these other companies have this stuff out there that's not, I mean, to be honest, it's geared towards cattle, not horses.
Well, that's just like the food pyramid that we're supposed to be eating. Holy smokes, if I ate the way that our USDA, I think it's USDA, says to eat, I would be eating like 6 to 8 servings of carbohydrates and a lot of dairy, which, boy, I do love some cottage cheese and some yogurts and stuff, but I cannot eat the way that it is put out there for us to eat. Every person I know right now that's losing weight is doing some intermittent fasting. Yeah. And like, it's really hard to make money off of intermittent fasting.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
So it's not highly promoted.
No. So mineral balancing is something that, again, over a decade ago in university, I was learning. They talked about how you have to have a hay analysis that is so important because it determines what you feed a horse, what kind of minerals, vitamins, anything you're giving a horse, it's going to determine that. And then sometimes that even goes into like testing water and stuff like that too. And we still have issues. And we have serious issues in a horse. Like I'm going to go into metabolic conditions. Laminitis always has an underlying condition to it that causes that, laminitis in the horse to founder. And a lot of the time we're finding in the Midwest specifically that horses are iron sensitive. A horse should get between 400 and 500 milligrams of iron a day. And there's no place in North America where they get a deficiency of that or do not meet those requirements either from pasture or from the hay. So now we see salt blocks that are iron, the red salt blocks, right? Well, that's adding another 1,000 milligrams depending on how much the horse eats a day. And now we're adding feed, and you look at like a lot of, for example, Purina's, and I don't mean this to say that, any brand is bad or good, but they don't necessarily list the iron. And so you have to call them or call a representative and say, hey, what's really in this?
Right.
And then they tell you, and the one was this big tub that they were like a lick for horses, and one of the first ingredients was sugar in it, which we don't promote for the horses. I like to promote a forage-based diet for a horse. That's what they're meant to be eating.
Because it's natural.
Right. And there's a lot of forage alternatives you can give if you need to give weight or something like that, and alternatives that are safe. But the added iron, you have to ask a lot of those representatives. We can have an excess of selenium. I've seen a few horses with selenium poisoning, which is a pretty severe condition in a horse. Their hoof capsule will kind of want to fall apart and almost slough off sometimes.
Gross.
I've seen that. And it's like 2 horses are fine in the pasture, and then the third one's messed up. And we do the blood analysis, and the vet's like, whoa, we need something to change here.
Well, you know what? Like, I know that, like, one of my friends had her arm, she got her arm hurt. Well, then it's not healing back. And the doctor said, hey, you've got to cut down on sugar, even though she's not obese by any means, but sugar keeps us from healing. Like, I don't think people realize the problems that we can have from too much or too little of something, and not dealing with just weight, but of the actual content of something, just like the iron.
Right. Well, we talk about iron a lot specifically because I do a lot of laminitic foundered horses, and iron can be a huge contributor to foot soreness in horses. So excess iron in a horse actually can stop the absorption of copper and zinc properly, and copper and zinc are our building blocks for keratin, which is what our hooves and our hair and everything are made out of.
Oh, okay. So here we go. The smoke from whenever you put a hot shoe on. Have you ever had any horses or mules that had a problem with it?
Yeah, we call those non-smokers.
Oh,
non-smokers.
I had a clinician here that trained police officers, and he talked about whenever they're walking through fire that the I don't know if it's fur or hair that a horse has. But
hair.
It's hair.
Because they don't have an undercoat, so it'd be hair.
Okay, it's hair.
The hair coat.
Okay, the hair coat. Said that it doesn't catch on fire as much because it has a higher nitrogen level in the hair more than carbon-based, even though it has all of the same elements. So you don't, whenever you're dealing with this hot shoe and putting it onto the animal, that's why none of the hair catches on fire, is because of the composition of it?
Oh, no. It can catch on fire.
Does it stay on fire, though?
No, because usually at that point, both the horse and I are like, holy crap. I've had a draft horse that I accidentally got on fire one time. The owner about had a complete conniption. It was not good on either front. But then we learned after that, I told the owner, I was like, look, you got to wrap that hair up. Like, I'm here to shoe the horse. That's not my responsibility. Like, I will try if I can, but I said, you got to have something here.
Right. Because they can have, with the draft horse, I expect like really long, fetlock hair that's just hanging there.
This was
like a normal animal is not, a normal horse is not going to have that excessive amount of hair.
No. I mean, it's keratin. I mean, it burns. It's the same thing as your hair. It smells the exact same burning hair does as burning hoof does. just stronger, obviously, because there's a lot more of it in a hoof. But no, it's not. I mean, unless you got a draft with really long hair, it's not gonna.
Not an issue. And the horse was not hurt, right?
No,
that you're talking
well,
about.
no, it scared the daylights out of both of us. The horse went one way, I went the other. The shoe went rolling down the aisle. Like it was it was
like,
kind of a like a 3-ring circus for a second. But then the horse was fine. Like it just burnt some of the hair, and the owner was like, "Oh my gosh." Yeah. And I was like, what do I have to do? Like, do I have to buy extensions? Like, what am I going to do? And after that, I was like, hey, we need to wrap all 4 of these legs up because I'm not going to try and tiptoe around and then hair, a lot of hair slippery trying to hold the foot too. It's really awkward.
Okay. So you have a few goals that you've been talking about that you're wanting to do. You are wanting to get your CF and your CJF. So the CF is to become a certified farrier. See, I would expect you to be a certified farrier coming from farrier school in Oklahoma, but it's a different certification.
No. Okay. So some horseshoeing schools will say you can be certified straight out of school. And usually what that is through, because there's multiple different associations in the U.S., and probably the highly accredited one would be the American Farriers Association, and that's where the CF and CJF come from. And so there's multiple other associations. Like the one that comes out of school is usually, just out of school, sometimes the school will certify you and say, oh, you're a certified farrier, but that doesn't usually mean anything to other farriers. Whereas someone going through a CF or CJF or the International Worshipful Company of Farriers, which is something that's recognized worldwide, that's considered, highly accredited, this person can build the shoes, they can, do the trimming, they can shoot a protocol basically. So if a vet were to call you and say, hey, I need this shoe on this horse, you can say, I can build that and make that. So CF is, with the AFA, is just a shoe board. You can use keg shoes. You have to do modifications.
So keg shoes are the ones that already come.
Yeah, you can just buy them in a store, farrier store.
Mm-hmm.
Or, and I've seen CF people who have handmade their shoes for that too, but it's not that common because of the...
So and then the CJF, the CJF is Certified Journeyman Farrier, and the Journeyman is the one that makes everything is handmade.
Everything is handmade. So for a CF, both of these tests, you have 3 portions. You have the shoe board, which is your shoes that you've shod to a pattern that fit the pattern, and to the modifications that the association asks for. Then you have to do a written test and then a live shoeing. For the CF, again, you can use keg shoes for the live shoeing, and you can have your shoe board can be keg shoes. Where the CJF, everything's handmade, and you have to shoe the whole horse with plain stamps within a certain amount of time.
Okay. So it just ups the ante, and you got to be able to perform under stresses. So that's okay.
Yep, and you have to have the CF where you get the CJF. And they have another one in between there, but not a lot of people do that. They usually just jump from the CF to the CJF.
Okay.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, you know what? A lot of people don't even know that there's a farrier school, and they don't know that there's all this continuing education. And, man, I know that I expect greatness from my farriers because... my livelihood is we have an equine trail riding facility, and then so many animals, the word lameness, that just means that they're not walking correctly, right? Or what is exactly the definition of lameness, or your usable definition?
I don't usually necessarily, if I'm looking at a horse before I have a vet look at it, so farriers, there's always a fine line between farriers and vets. And so we have to make sure that we both stay in our own lanes, that farriers aren't diagnosing lameness, giving medical advice, etc., and vets aren't shoeing horses telling the farrier how to shoe, right? Okay. We got to work as a team. It's a 3-part team, sometimes a 4-part, 5-part, depending on who else is working on the horse. You've got your farrier, your owner, your vet, and then maybe a body worker, nutritionist, something like that, right?
Right.
And so I tend to not use... lameness, as I might say, the horse is off. You need to call the vet before anything is diagnosed. I might say, here's what I see. This horse is doing this. Oh, we've got, like I mentioned to you the one time I said, oh, JoJo's knees look a little bit. You might have the vet look at that, right? Because that's not something that I could say, oh, that's a bursitis, because that's not in my lane. That's not my...
because you didn't go to school for that.
Yeah, I'm not a vet.
Well, I have went to, I've had to go to lameness veterinarians before because just could not figure something out, and it took us a while to figure out what the heck it was because they had to block different things. And it turns out I thought it was her right shoulder and it ended up being her left hoof. But it took us a little while to figure out exactly what it was. And then the vet had me work with a farrier to put a wedge, just like a little bit of an angle on that hoof. But then after the animal, she was new to me. Her name was Chalkboard, okay? And she's like the main character of my 3rd children's book. But whenever I got her, she was not proper nutrition. She did not have proper nutrition. She just kind of looked... oh my gosh, just like somebody had a horse, this farmer just left it out there and didn't really like take care of her the way it needed to be taken care of. So whenever I had her, we had all sorts of issues that had to be dealt with. But after she was, we got her proper nutrition, we got her muscled up. Well, she has one hoof that kind of pancaked out, and she doesn't have any lameness issues as long as she stays muscled up. So it was it took a year to get her. She had to have that shoe with that wedge for, I don't know, maybe like 5 different sets of putting those shoes on. And then after that, she had no more issues with it as long as we kept her muscled up.
Yeah. So, spring and fall, we're seeing this rise because we're in the middle of laminitis season, founder season, from the seasonal rises with the grasses and stuff like that. And so I tell everybody, you can't necessarily shoo your way out of things like founder and laminitis. You can't necessarily shoo your way out of a tendon injury or a hoof problem, but it's a supportive measure for everything that's done in between. So you can put a shoe on a horse, but if the owner goes back out and it's lame, you put a shoe on a horse and it's lame, and the owner goes back out and rides the crap out of that horse because, oh my gosh, all of a sudden it's sound, but that horse hasn't had time to recover. That shoe is just a supportive measure for that horse's healing and well-being, not what happens in between. Because there could be 4, 6, whatever other farriers do in between that shoeing that happens, and what happens in between there, how they're fed, how they're cared for, how they're ridden. That is what the determining factor a lot of the time is for if that shoe, that modification, that trim is going to work.
Right. Okay. All right. Sydney has a huge following on TikTok and has a very big potty mouth, which my husband loves it. He's just like, wow, Sydney brings it on some TikTok. Okay.
Well, being from Canada, I don't think the phrase should be cusses like a sailor. It should be cusses like a Canadian because we swear a lot.
Oh my gosh.
That's just, I find people can be subdued in the U.S. compared to Canada for swearing.
The other day, I seen some TikToks, and then there was another TikTok about you were rolling up to this stop sign in Kansas City and somebody had an entire lasagna. Like you look outside and you're like, there's an entire lasagna right here. It wasn't molded. It wasn't bad. It was just like, probably could have got it, but I would have been totally afraid to. But it looked like an intact lasagna, like somebody left it on the top of their vehicle when they were about to go to
Oh, no, it didn't fall. Like, there's no way. That thing was perfect. So I actually have my stepson with me, and he's sitting in the passenger seat, and he goes, is that a lasagna? And we stopped, and there was a super long light because they were doing construction. Mm-hmm. And so we started cracking up, and so I took a video of it. And when we pulled up to the next stop sign, there was panhandlers there. And so we were telling all my clients that day about the lasagna because we're like, man, because we had so many horses at this barn. And I'm like, man, we should have got the lasagna. That could have been lunch. And instead we're sitting here shoeing these horses and we kept laughing about it all day. So we had theories from clients that it was the panhandlers, but it wasn't good for business. And so that she left it on the other corner. Okay. Another one was that Susan had it stuck it on top of her car and it fell off, which I don't think that happened because it was just so perfectly placed there. I don't know. Maybe somebody left it there for the panhandlers.
I just wish that we could find the other half of this lasagna. Like
the story.
I spent 5 hours making this lasagna.
It was like a Walmart lasagna. Like it was in the little metal tray.
Oh, okay. So I thought somebody had made it.
Yeah, we were laughing about it. And when we got back to the farm, my mother-in-law was there, and we were talking about her and my father-in-law have been married for 50 years, and so they're going to have a party. And I asked her, I said, what do you want me to do? I said, do you want me to make the food or whatever? And she goes, oh no, I'm making lasagna.
And you're like, did that just happen?
And both my stepson Justin and I just like lost it. And we were laughing, and she's standing there going like, what is so funny about lasagna?
And you're like, there was a lasagna on the side of the road, and then she's still like, I don't understand.
Yeah,
why
she
this
didn't
is
understand
funny.
about the lasagna. She had no idea, but we were just cutting it up. I mean, just laughing because we're like, isn't that funny that we kept talking the whole way home. We're like, man, we should have just turned around. It was the next exit when got lasagna and brought it home. Like,
So if they would like, okay, so I think you're what, Sid the Farrier?
Farrier Sid.
Farrier Sid. And so FarrierSyd.
Yeah.
Okay, so they can find you there. And then do you, how do they find you for Farrier services? The Farrier Sid is more for like entertainment.
That's like my follow me around for the dumb things that I do on a daily basis. And there's a little bit of hoof trimming and some fun things, and there's some facts and stuff like that. I've got my Farrier business on Facebook, which is Feet First Farrier Service.
Feet First Farrier Service.
Yep.
Boy, that's a lot to say. Feet First Farrier Service.
That one is easy. That's probably where I get like a lot of people.
Okay.
Like I get people from all over the U.S. that message me on that page.
Okay.
And the cool thing about it is that being with other farriers that I ride with personally and to the clinics and stuff I go to, I've got this huge network of farriers that all I have to do is put a post out on Facebook and say, hey, what farrier services this area? I got this lady asking me that she's got this special case. Who can take this on? And I mean, I can have somebody within 10 minutes. I could have a phone number of another farrier that could help that person.
See, that's just great. Networking is a wonderful thing. Like I mean, like right now, we just had some trail guests that were camping here, and they got here late. Well, then they're explaining they've got the mom and pop blues, okay, because owning these businesses that are self-owned. Yeah. They are having difficulty getting away. Well, I was like, well, what are you looking for? And then they told me, and then I was like, well, how much are you paying? And then I was like, can they do it from their home 2 out of 5 days a week? And they're like, yep. So I'm like, okay. I said, I will keep a lookout because I see people from all over. And they're just like, whoa, we never thought about, I was like, you got to put that stuff on Facebook. I was like, because people will be like, you never know the reach that you're going to get, and then I love businesses because you just never know who you're going. Like right now, we've been working with several restaurants locally, so we've been focusing on promoting our wedding venue. You just never know. I mean, like I think people need to share their story and then meet other people and don't just be a hermit. You got to get out there.
Yes,
and
absolutely. So I've been seeing this coming. Growing up in Canada. So growing up in Canada, I would say that they're socialists, and they're about 10 years ahead of what's all going on here. So we're seeing things happen like the energy companies 10 years ago in Canada were metering our electric, and now it's happening here. So like they're saying that, hey, you can get a cheaper rate if you do laundry between 8 p.m. and 8 a.m. We'll give you a cheaper rate on your electricity. And what they're doing is they're trying to charge more for peak times when people are home in the evening, and then off times or mid times are like the times that people will be at work or the time when you'd be sleeping. That's what they're saying. You should do your laundry, run your dishwasher, stuff like that. And so I've said this for a while. We've gone from the industrial age to the information age. So before people were working in factories, they had a 9-to-5 job. You could make your living off of that, where that doesn't fly anymore. And it wasn't when I was coming out of high school. That was just the beginning. You could still get a factory job, but your likelihood of getting laid off or not getting a pension were way higher than our parents. So our parents had that. They had it locked in. They got their cared for life. And that's all they knew. And so they pushed us to say, hey, go get a factory job, get a job with a pension, get a job with a retirement, stuff like that, where their parents didn't do that. They were back in, the 20s, 30s, stuff like that, where you still had to build your own business. You still had to come home, save for retirement, buy things that would become lucrative for retirement. And in this day and age, that just doesn't happen. So now we're in the information age. And the way that we make money is by sharing information to other people, by connecting one person to the next person that needs that info, be it word of mouth, us talking here, or like Brandy does her websites and her marketing.
Well, Okay, so here we go. We're going to do a little bubble, like my little bubble thought. So my husband right now, we're in the process of him creating his online wood shop. He's becoming an online wood shop instructor, okay? And the other day I asked him, well, where'd you learn how to weld? And I was like, did you learn how to weld in high school? And he's like, no, they didn't offer that in high school where he went to. His brother had to teach it to him. And, we've experienced that with our kids' camps, and I used to be a school teacher. Like, kids are just missing some basic wood shop skills. Yeah. So I looked up Missouri's grade level expectations, like what is expected for kids to learn in wood shop classes. And Missouri doesn't have a set amount. It doesn't have a set course for that. There's national standards, so I'm sure each state is using those national standards. But I was like, wow, how is it 2021 and we don't have a set curriculum that tells every student in shop class? And I think it's just because a lot of schools don't offer shop. Yeah. And now there's a lot of kids that are going to homeschool. So I'm really excited with what my husband is able to send to them in their home so they can still learn some of those skills, because if they don't learn it from my husband, they might not learn it from their parents, and then it's going to be a lost art.
It amazes me this day how many kids just can't swing a hammer. They can't put a nail into a bore. They don't know how to run a drill, or
they don't know how to measure.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that's so important. I mean, I used a tape measure this morning before I even headed here. It was just,
right.
It's something that every day I don't even think about it. There's always a tape measure in my truck. There's always a hammer. There's a drill. There's, stuff
and
like
just
that.
like here with us owning this trail riding facility, we have so many clinicians that come to us. Well, a lot of people don't have that, I'm going to put in quotes, luxury. It's a lot of work, okay? But with me, used to be a school teacher, and now getting this influx of information, that's why I created my Horsemanship with Brandy, which is an online horsemanship course. I mean, so they can get some of the information that's been presented to myself, because you can't travel around to, nobody's going to be able to, I'm not going to say nobody. There's people out there with lots of money, but there's a lot of people not. But what I have is every year I get to see more clinicians, and then they can come to me and take these online horsemanship courses, because there's so many things that people just don't know about horses. I have one called Horse Knowledge, and it has a level 1, level 2, level 3. Then I have From the Saddle. And there's a lot of adults that never got to get that basic information, because a lot of people don't get horses until later. And then I have Mounted Archery. So that's going to be where Sydney and my paths cross once again, because you are looking into getting into mounted archery. I think you had started it, and then freaking COVID happened, but then it's in our future. Yeah. So anyways, people, you need to check out Sydney, and you can find her on Facebook, and it was Feet First Farrier Service. I'm just thinking of a baby being born, feet first. That's whenever I'm like, I don't think it's supposed to be feet first.
It's
Feet First Farrier Service, and then you can also look her up on TikTok, and that is Farrier Sid. And then if you wanted to get in touch with me, you can always go to brandyvonholten.com. All right, thank you very much. Y'all have a wonderful day, and thank you for tuning in to Big Boss Mare with Brandy Von Holten.